The day my world shattered, I was in my studio, surrounded by the smell of burnt metal and the quiet hum of my tools. My hands, calloused and strong, were working on a new sculpture, a delicate piece meant to represent the intricate balance of a perfect life. Ironic, isn't it? Just as I was about to fuse the final piece into place, my phone buzzed with a message from my brother, a commercial airline pilot. "Chloe," he wrote, "I need to ask you something strange. Is your husband home right now?" I looked up from my work to see Julian, my brilliant, handsome, and much adored husband, sitting on the patio. A serene look on his face as he scrolled through his phone. "Yes, he is," I texted back. A few seconds later, my brother's reply came through, a single line that ripped through the very fabric of my reality. "That can't be true. I'm watching him right now. He's boarding my flight to Hawaii with another woman." I stared at the phone, my sculpture falling from my hands and clattering to the floor. The intricate balance I had worked so hard to create was now in 1,000 pieces. I looked from the broken metal to the man on the patio. The warm California sun seemed to glint off his perfect smile, the one that had charmed me for 8 years. He looked exactly as he always did, a world-renowned cardiac surgeon who saved lives and came home to live what I thought was a perfect one. But my brother's words hung in the air, a discordant note in the symphony of our lives, revealing a truth I wasn't prepared for. I had to know which of these two realities was a lie. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the answer would determine whether my life was a masterpiece or a perfect forgery. My hands are my life. For years, they have been my language, my tools for translating the chaotic world of human emotion into the clean, unwavering form of steel. As a sculptor, I find peace in the permanence of metal. It is a material that tells no lies. You heat it, you bend it, you shape it, and its truth is laid bare in every curve and every weld. This meticulous process, the patience of seeing a design through from raw ore to polished form, defined who I was long before Julian Vance ever entered my life. It was a practice in control, in finding the hidden integrity within the unyielding. Julian, on the other hand, was all fluid grace and effortless charm. The world saw him as a genius, a man who worked miracles. He was a cardiac surgeon, his hands famous for mending broken hearts, his mind revered for its brilliant strategic precision. He was a master of his own narrative, weaving a story of a demanding, high-stakes life where every moment was spent either saving lives or recovering from the Herculean effort. He moved through a room like he owned it, not with arrogance, but with a quiet confidence that came from knowing his value. When we met at a charity gala, I, a woman who spent her days in a studio smelling of fire and grime, was instantly drawn to the elegance of his life. He made me feel like an art form, not just an artist. "My little sculptor," he'd call me, and the diminutive felt less like a slight and more like an endearment. He loved my art, he said, but always with a gentle qualifier. "It's so freeing for you, isn't it, darling? A lovely hobby to balance the pressures of my life." His compliments were subtle chains, linking my passion to his purpose, making my world feel small and inconsequential next to his grand one. And because I loved him, I let him. Our home, a breathtaking modernist house perched on a cliffside in Malibu, was a testament to the illusion we had built. From the outside, it was a masterpiece of glass and light. A life lived in perfect harmony with the rolling waves of the Pacific. Inside, Every detail was carefully curated to project an image of success and serenity. The pristine white walls were a canvas for my sculptures, each piece a silent witness to a life that looked perfect, but was, in retrospect, riddled with fault lines. Our routines were a ballet of domestic bliss. Early morning coffee on the deck, his crisp white lab coat hanging over a chair, my hands sketching new designs while he read his financial papers. It was a script we both knew by heart, a performance of a long married couple who had found their peace. But scripts, I was learning, are only as good as the actors who perform them. The first cracks in our perfect facade appeared a few months ago, so subtle that I brushed them off as the unavoidable stress of his career. There was the week he was supposedly in Toronto for an international conference, a trip I couldn't join him on due to a tight gallery deadline. But when he returned, his eyes were clear of the usual jet lag, and his skin had a faint, golden tan that was impossible in a cold Toronto winter. When I asked about it, he just laughed. My colleague took us to a spa. My God, it was a miracle for my back. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was Julian Vance, a man of unimpeachable character. Then there was the strange series of cash withdrawals from our joint account. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. Always just under the threshold that would trigger a notification. He'd explained them away with vague phrases like, cash for the green market, or a special auction. My forensic mind, trained to spot patterns in the chaos, noted the inconsistency, but my heart, still so deeply in love, dismissed them. A professional sculptor, I knew that the most beautiful forms often have hidden imperfections. A tiny flaw in the steel, an air bubble in the weld, they were just part of the process. I had been so conditioned to look for the perfect form that I was blind to the grotesque one being forged right in front of me. The last red flag was the most blatant, a final piece of evidence that my sculptor's eye should have recognized immediately. A few weeks ago, I had been in his office looking for a file when a message notification popped up on his laptop screen. It was from a contact saved as L. Flight to Maui secured, everything is ready. He walked in right then, his face freezing for a fraction of a second. Before I could process what I'd read, he had closed the laptop, a half smile on his face. Just a new project, he said too quickly. A surprise for a client. The lie was as heavy as lead, but he delivered it with such confident ease that I found myself apologizing for prying. My intuition screamed, but I silenced it, preferring the comfortable lie to the painful truth. I didn't want to see the jagged, ugly edge of the real sculpture he had been building this whole time. And so, my world continued on its perfectly crafted path. I returned to my studio, to the honesty of fire and steel. He went to work, to the precision of the operating room. We were two artists, each working on our own masterpiece. But the one he was creating was a grotesque, elaborate forgery of our life. It was a structure built on secrets, a beautiful facade hiding a void. I had spent so long looking at the surface, at the polished exterior, that I had missed the cancer eating away at the core. The entire foundation of my life was a lie, a house of cards waiting for the slightest breeze to send it tumbling down. That breeze came that Tuesday morning, not from the ocean, but from the cockpit of a Boeing 787. And as I held my breath, the words that would bring it all down came not from a lover or an enemy, but from the one person who would never, ever lie to me, my brother. Julian returned from his run exactly as the sun reached its zenith, a ritual he performed every Tuesday and Thursday. He was a creature of habit, and in that predictability, I had always found comfort. Today, It felt like a cage. He entered the house, his athletic frame radiating health, his face flushed with the kind of glow only an hour of physical exertion could produce. He kissed me on the forehead, the touch feeling foreign, as if an actor had mistakenly used the wrong prop. "A perfect day for a run," he said, reaching for a bottle of water. I stared at him, the man who was both here and somewhere else, and a new kind of silence filled the room. It was not the comfortable silence of a shared life, but the charged, dangerous quiet before a storm. My mind, once lost in a storm of panic, had become a calm, cold machine. I was no longer a betrayed wife. I was a sculptor, a problem solver. My art had always been about deconstruction and reconstruction, about finding the hidden forms within a block of raw material. This was no different. My raw material was Julian's deception, and my goal was to find the truth hidden within its carefully crafted facade. I had to act, not with emotion, but with the same precision I used to weld two pieces of steel together. I knew I couldn't confront him, not yet. I needed evidence. I needed to see the blueprint of the lie before I could tear it down. My first act was to turn my studio from a place of creation into a lab. I was trained to work with metal, to see the integrity of a structure. I knew how to work with miniature parts, to bend wires, to hide small components within larger works. I pulled out a half-finished sculpture, a sprawling, abstract piece meant to look like a cluster of tangled branches. No one, least of all Julian, would ever look closely at it. I spent hours meticulously embedding a series of microcameras and tiny microphones into its core. The cameras were no larger than a grain of rice, the microphones barely visible wires. My hands, calloused and steady, moved with the familiarity of a surgeon's. Julian was a master of his craft. I would be a master of mine. I placed the sculpture in our living room near a large window where it would receive excellent light and have a clear view of the main seating area. I placed another, smaller piece, a metal flower, on his office desk, its petals subtly shielding a lens pointed at his computer. Julian, with his casual disregard for my work, would never suspect that my art was now watching his every move, listening to his every word. The second call I made was to my best friend, Maya. She was a sound engineer for film, a woman who could hear a whisper in a hurricane and tell you what a person was feeling just by the subtle tremor in their voice. She was the only person I trusted with this bizarre, terrifying secret. I called her, my voice strained but calm. "Maya," I said, "I need your help with a new art project. It's about creating a soundscape of authenticity. I've set up some microphones, and I need you to help me analyze the recordings. I think some of the conversations are missing a certain resonance." I didn't need to say more. She knew my language. She understood that resonance was my code for truth. She agreed without question, her only instruction being, "Just send me everything. The more data, the clearer the picture." While Maya began her work, I started my own, using the same systematic approach I applied to my sculpting. I needed to understand the raw material of Julian's life. I started with our finances. My work had taught me that money is a story, and you can read a person's life by following the trail of their spending. I accessed our joint bank accounts, a fortress of financial security that Julian managed with what I had always considered to be an admirable professional hand. I began to track every transaction, cross-referencing credit card charges with Julian's calendar. I found the first major crack on his business credit card. A series of large purchases at a jewelry store in Beverly Hills. Not just one or two, but a recurring pattern of purchases over the past 6 months, each one for an expensive piece of jewelry, a diamond necklace, a sapphire bracelet, a pair of custom-made earrings. He had never given me any of them. I remembered a vague conversation months ago about client gifts. I had believed him, of course. He was a man of integrity. Now, I saw it for what it was, a flimsy cover for a well-funded second life. Next, I found a series of charges for what he had called team-building retreats. They were to places like Miami, Cabo, and the Bahamas. Again, he had explained them away with the casual air of a busy professional. But the charges were always for 2 people. 2 spa treatments, 2 plane tickets, a room service bill with a clear signature from Julian, but a small note in the corner that read, "For the other guest." It wasn't just an affair. It was an affair conducted with the budget of a Fortune 500 company. My suspicion grew, but the most unsettling discovery was yet to come. I had installed a keylogger on his home office computer, disguised as an update for my sculpting software. It was a risky move, but one my gut told me I had to take. The data that came back was a chilling glimpse into the mind of a double agent. There were emails to a series of shell companies, all registered in places like the Cayman Islands and Panama. The subject lines were innocent enough: Q3 strategy or client follow-up. But the content was a different story. It was all about money laundering, about moving large sums of money through a complex web of offshore accounts. Julian Vance, the cardiac surgeon, was bleeding our accounts dry, and his business wasn't saving lives, it was stealing them. Then, a text from Maya came through. "Chloe," it read, "I've got it. The missing resonance." I ran the last 3 months of audio through a voice analysis program. It's subtle, but it's there. The tonal shifts, the rhythm of speech, even the way he laughs. It's not Julian. It's a trained impersonator. And the background noise. I've isolated it. It's not just a coffee shop. It's a specific coffee shop in Venice Beach, near the boardwalk. My world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just Julian living a double life. It was a completely different person living my husband's life. Why? What was the end game? Was Julian already in Hawaii, in Paris, in Dubai? Was he a victim too? A pawn in a game I couldn't even begin to comprehend? The rational part of my mind, the part that had spent a lifetime making sense of chaos, reeled from the impossibility of it all. But my sculptor's mind, the part that saw the hidden forms, knew that this was the core of the deception. The imposter wasn't the lie. He was the vessel for the lie. The real lie was the life that was being taken from me. I looked at the man on the patio. He was on a call now, laughing softly into the phone. The sound, once so familiar, now grated against my ears. It was a carefully crafted imitation of the man I loved, a performance so perfect it had fooled me for months. But now, I saw the seams. I saw the hollow space where the truth should be. My mission was no longer about proving an affair. It was about exposing an entire web of lies. I was ready to stop being the silent witness and start being the architect of a new reality. My next step was clear. I had to create a test so specific to Julian Vance that no one else could pass it. The game was no longer about observation. It was about confrontation. And this time, I was going to be the one to choose the time and place. The moment the man who looked like my husband walked through the door after his supposed board meeting, I felt a profound sense of clarity. My meticulously gathered evidence, the audio files, the credit card statements, the travel records, was a solid foundation, but it lacked a final, undeniable act of proof. A sculptor doesn't just analyze the material. She forces it to reveal its truth through fire and pressure. I knew what I had to do. I would create a test so specific, so deeply ingrained in Julian Vance's identity, that no impersonator, no matter how skilled, could ever pass it. This was my final piece, my magnum opus of revenge. I smiled at him as he shed his tailored jacket, a practiced, comfortable smile that had hidden so many secrets over the past few months. "Julian," I said, my voice calm, "the most extraordinary thing happened today." He was heading for his home office, briefcase in hand. "Oh, what's that?" he asked, not turning around. His casual demeanor was a masterclass in feigned normalcy. "My old professor called. Professor Harrison," I said, inventing a detail he couldn't possibly know. "He's in town for a conference and had a last-minute emergency. A patient needs an emergency aortic stent implant, but it's a new experimental procedure. They need a consultant to walk them through it, and he remembered you. He said you're the only one he trusts." I watched his back, waiting for the slightest flicker of panic. The real Julian Vance would have recognized the name of a world-renowned surgeon and the complexity of the procedure instantly. He would have seen a challenge, an opportunity for glory. "He's asking for you to consult over video call right now," I pressed. "It's a matter of life or death." He finally turned. His smile was gone, replaced by a careful, blank expression. "An aortic stent? Chloe, you know I'm not on call, and it's my night off." His voice was low, and for the first time, I heard a tremor of uncertainty. I told him that, but he was insistent, said he'd pay you any amount to consult. He sounded desperate. I held his gaze, willing him to crack. I had the video call open on my laptop, with my friend Maya on the other side, posing as the lead nurse. I had fed her every obscure medical detail I could find about the fake procedure, a series of codes and jargon that would be meaningless to anyone but a surgeon. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, an eternity for someone who had been living a lie. He tried to reclaim his composure, his professional air. "Tell him I'm sorry, but I can't. I'm exhausted. We can't save everyone, can we?" He said it with a practiced sigh, the world-weary tone of a tired doctor. It was his greatest mistake. My husband, the real Julian, would have seen a life to save, a chance to be a hero, and a 6-figure consulting fee. He would have been on that call in a heartbeat. He would have never, under any circumstances, said, "We can't save everyone." He was a god, and gods don't surrender. The man in my kitchen, this hollow replica, had just failed the test of his life. I walked over to the dining table and pressed a button on a small, unobtrusive device I had disguised as a metal flower in a vase. It was the signal. Within seconds, the doorbell rang. He looked at me, his eyes wide with confusion. "Who is that?" he whispered, his British accent gone, replaced by a panicked, raw urgency. I didn't answer. I opened the door to the 3 most powerful men from Julian's hospital: the head of cardiology, the head of the board, and Julian's chief resident. "Chloe?" the head of cardiology, Dr. Sterling, said, looking at the man behind me. "We're so sorry to intrude, but Dr. Vance, your husband, didn't show up for a critical board meeting this morning. We've been trying to reach him." They looked at the man in the kitchen with a mixture of confusion and concern. "He's right here," I said calmly, stepping aside. The man stood frozen, his face pale as he looked at the 3 senior doctors who held his career, and now his freedom, in their hands. He was a coffee barista, not a cardiac surgeon. He had no answers, no defense. His facade was crumbling. I held up my phone, a final act of merciless precision. Actually, gentlemen, this man is not Julian Vance. I played a short audio clip from my brother's cockpit. The sound of the jet engines, the pilot's voice, and then my brother's words. He's boarding my flight to Hawaii with another woman. The three doctors stared, their mouths agape. The real Julian Vance, I continued, is on a plane to Hawaii, not attending any board meetings. And this man is an imposter. The man looked from the doctors to me, his meticulously crafted persona finally shattering. His face, once so familiar, was now a portrait of terror and defeat. He had been so good at playing the role, but in this single critical moment, he had forgotten the most important rule of theater. The show must go on, but his show was already over. The silence that followed my revelation was a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. The three doctors, titans of the medical world, stood frozen in our living room. Their impeccable suits and practiced composure were no match for the grotesque reality unfolding before them. The man I had lived with for months, now exposed as Leo Carter, a small-time actor from Queens, looked like a frightened animal caught in a spotlight. His carefully rehearsed persona had vanished, replaced by a raw, naked terror. Dr. Sterling, a man who had commanded rooms and operating theaters for decades, finally broke the spell. This is a nightmare, he stammered, his voice stripped of its usual authority. He looked from Leo to me as if searching for an explanation that could make sense of the madness. What in God's name is going on here? Leo, recognizing that the only way out was through confession, began to speak, his Brooklyn accent now thick and raw. I swear, I didn't know about any of this. He told me he was Julian Vance. Said he needed someone to be his double for a book he was writing about identity and high-stakes business. He paid me a fortune, all in cash. Said it was for a series of research trips. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, no longer with the charm of the man who had pretended to be my husband, but with the desperation of a man about to lose his freedom. He made me keep a record of all of it. The instructions, the scripts, the details of his business trips. He said it was in case I tried to double-cross him. It's all in a storage unit in Queens. He gave me the address and a key, a final desperate plea for mercy. I simply nodded. His role as the villain was over. He was a victim too, just a small-time actor caught in a production far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. The head of the board, Dr. Morgan, was already on the phone. Get me the police, the FBI, the hospital's legal team. We have a massive fraud on our hands. His voice, usually calm and measured, was frantic. He was beginning to realize the full scope of Julian's betrayal, not just of me, but of the entire medical community. Just then, Dr. Sterling's phone rang. He answered it, his face turning from pale to ashen. He listened for a long moment, then hung up and looked at me, a new, grudging respect in his eyes. That was the airport authorities. A man matching Julian Vance's description was just apprehended, attempting to board a private jet to Dubai with a woman in her 20s. They were caught with forged documents and a substantial amount of undeclared cash. The Paris authorities had already put out an international warrant. He was a fugitive on the run. The news hit the room with the force of a physical blow. The impossible had become a horrifying reality. Julian Vance, the celebrated heart surgeon, was a criminal mastermind, and the man who had been living in my home was nothing more than a pawn in his elaborate game. Over the next few hours, my home was transformed into a crime scene. Law enforcement and hospital investigators swarmed the place, their presence an almost surreal invasion of the perfect life Julian had so carefully crafted. They moved with a cold, professional efficiency, photographing every room, questioning every detail. The police read Leo his rights, and he went with them willingly, a defeated but strangely relieved man. My meticulously gathered evidence, the hidden cameras, the keylogger data, the bank statements, was now the foundation of a federal case. The beautiful, forged reality that Julian had built for us was now nothing but evidence. I sat calmly on my studio floor, the very place where I had first heard the truth, watching as my old life was meticulously disassembled. Each box of documents, each file of evidence, felt like a layer of a past I was shedding. The lies were coming to an end. My hands, which had spent a lifetime creating things, were now a part of this process of deconstruction. I was the sculptor of my own undoing, but in this destruction, I was also building something new. The hardest part was the phone call to my brother, who had just landed back in Los Angeles. "It's over," I said, my voice thick with exhaustion. He listened, silent for a moment, then he just said, "Thank God, Chloe." His simple words were the first bit of healing I had felt. He, Maya, and a handful of close friends became my sanctuary. They didn't ask for details, they didn't offer empty platitudes. They simply showed up, brought food, and sat with me in the deafening silence of my new reality. They were my true masterpieces, the people who had seen the cracks and stayed to help me mend. Julian's undoing was swift and public. The news reports were brutal. Celebrity surgeon arrested for multi-million-dollar fraud. Double life of Dr. Vance exposed. The articles detailed how he had used his access to sensitive patient data for insider trading. How he had created a network of shell companies to launder money and hide his illegal gains. How he had manipulated a small-time actor to pose as him while he drained his and his unsuspecting clients' assets. It was a story straight out of a thriller, a tale of ambition and greed that had cost him everything. His reputation was in tatters, his assets frozen, and his career in ruins. The man who had once been a god was now a common criminal. His perfect life, a perfectly crafted lie. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a profound, deep-seated sense of relief. It was like living with a chronic illness for years, a pain that gnaws at you from the inside. And then one day, it's just gone. The hole in my heart where Julian used to be was now filled with a strange kind of emptiness, but an emptiness that finally had room for truth. I hadn't just salvaged my life. I had forged a new one, a masterpiece born not of fire and steel, but of betrayal and truth. The man who had tried to define me had only succeeded in empowering me, and I was ready to use this newfound power to not only rebuild my own life, but to help others do the same. As the last FBI agent left my home, I stood in the middle of the living room, a space that no longer felt like my own. The quiet was different now. It was no longer a prelude to a storm, but the beginning of a new day. My sculpture was not yet complete, but I knew what I was building, a future where my art was my voice, my skills were my armor, and my truth was my foundation. The man who was once the architect of my life had only managed to be the catalyst for my liberation, and for that, in a strange, twisted way, I was finally free. A year has passed since the perfect sculpture of my life was revealed to be a forgery. Julian Vance, the man who was once a celebrated surgeon, is now nothing more than a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in the hallowed halls of medicine, and a footnote in financial crime reports. His trial was a public spectacle, a brutal dissection of a man who thought he could play God with human lives and human identities. The evidence was irrefutable. His lawyer, a sharp, seasoned professional, had to admit defeat against the mountain of proof. The forensic detail, the security footage, the voice analysis. It was a case built on scientific precision, a language Julian himself had once claimed to speak. But it was a language I, with my sculptor's eye for detail, had mastered far more effectively. The divorce was mercifully swift. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had seen her share of betrayal, showed no sympathy for a husband who had not only cheated, but also hired an actor to replace himself while systematically stealing his wife's assets. The settlement was far more than I had ever expected. The proceeds from the sale of our house, the recovered funds from Julian's frozen offshore accounts, and a substantial sum for damages left me with a financial independence I never knew I wanted, let alone needed. Money couldn't buy back the months of sleeping next to a stranger, or the years I had lived a lie, but it could buy me freedom. The freedom to rebuild, to create a life from the ground up, this time with my own two hands. And so, I started with the foundation. The beautiful, deceptive house in Malibu was sold. I couldn't live there, surrounded by the ghosts of a perfect life that never existed. I used a portion of the settlement to purchase an old, expansive warehouse in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. The building had character, with high ceilings and scarred concrete floors. It was a blank canvas, a raw material waiting for a new purpose. My new space wasn't just a studio, it was my sanctuary, my workshop, and my school. I spent months renovating it myself, my hands aching from the work, but my spirit soaring. I stripped away the layers of old paint, exposed the raw brick, and installed a new forge, a bigger, more powerful one. In this space, with the heat of the forge and the cool certainty of metal, I was truly home. The front section of the warehouse became a gallery where my latest works are displayed. The back is where my true masterpiece is taking shape. It's a workshop where I mentor women who have been betrayed, just like me. They come to me from all walks of life, CEOs, homemakers, teachers, and doctors, all victims of a quiet, insidious deception. They share their stories, their pain, their confusion, and their rage, and I teach them to work with their hands. I show them how to shape and mold metal, to transform the jagged, broken pieces of their lives into something beautiful and strong. We don't just sculpt metal, we forge a new kind of beauty. A beauty born from scars and resilience. In this new space, I am no longer just Chloe Foster, the sculptor. I am a specialist in marital asset protection and identity verification. My personal trauma has become my professional calling. Word of mouth has spread like wildfire, and my client list is a testament to the quiet epidemic of deception that plagues our society. Just last week, I helped a surgeon from the Upper East Side discover that her husband of 15 years had been using deepfake technology to appear at medical conferences while actually running a separate, illegal practice in Miami. The week before, a Broadway producer learned her spouse had hired 3 different lookalikes to maintain his alibis across multiple cities. Each case feels like I am excavating layers of deception with the same tools that saved my own life. I never thought this would be my legacy. Julian wanted to make me an ornament, a beautiful, silent object in his perfect life. He wanted my talent to be nothing more than a quiet hobby, a lovely detail in his grand narrative. But he failed. He gave me the one thing I was missing, the fire of purpose. The tools I used to create art became the tools I used to expose a lie. My meticulous nature, once a quirky part of my personality, became my greatest weapon. I learned that the strongest creations are the ones that have been broken and mended, the ones that bear the scars of their own making. My new life isn't perfect. There's no charismatic, handsome doctor by my side, but it is mine. Every decision, every success, every mistake is my own. The quiet hum of the studio, the smell of fresh-cut metal, the camaraderie of the women working beside me. It's a symphony of my own making, a far more beautiful sound than any life Julian could have conducted. The best revenge isn't just about making them fall. It's about rising so high they can't even see you. And in this new life, I am soaring. If you've been on a similar journey of betrayal and healing, you know that the greatest strength is found not in a fight, but in the quiet, solitary act of rebuilding. If this story of justice and empowerment resonated with you, hit that like button right now. My favorite part of this story was when Chloe set up the perfect trap for the imposter, using his own fake persona against him. What was your most jaw-dropping moment? Drop it in the comments below. And don't miss more gripping stories of betrayal and resilience. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you.